Hey guys, it's Hank from Sprues and Brews, and today we're going to be talking about refurbishing your old scale model kits. One of the biggest recommendations I have for somebody that's just getting into this hobby, or for somebody that's been doing this for years, is don't be afraid to pull an old build off the shelf and try and improve it. In my mind, one of the best things about this hobby is that we as scale modelers are always trying to improve our skills. With each kit that you finish, your painting skills and your weathering skills get a little bit better. You learn something new with each build and take that onto your next project, so that one will be even better than your last. While it can be really tempting to just order yourself a new kit online, I highly recommend pulling one off the shelf that you finished a year ago or even 10 years ago and trying to improve it a little bit. Today I'm going to be doing that with Tamiya's 135 scale M10 tank destroyer. I built up this awesome little kit 3 or 4 years ago and competed it at an IPMS show, and it ended up taking home silver for its category, which I was super happy about. I'm still really proud of the build, but looking at it now, the weathering's a little aggressive, it's a little too dusty, and the diorama base is pretty simple. So today I'm gonna repaint it, I'm gonna add some new decals, and I'm gonna re-weather the whole thing. I know it sounds a little scary, but it's an awesome way to improve your skills, save a little money, and make something new out of an old kit. So let's check it out. Grab yourself a beverage, get cozy, and let's see what we can do to improve this little guy. And make sure you stick around to the end for some before and after shots so you can let me know what you think of the refurb. All right, let's check it out. All right guys, so here is our M10 before we do any refurb work. First step is going to be to remove this from the base and take the turret off so we can start working on the individual parts. We're going to pop off our figure because he looks great. We can use him for something else. And I'm going to take a few components off the engine deck that I just don't want on here anymore. The first major upgrade we're going to do here is with Ammo MIG's anti-slip paste. This works really well for replicating the cast texture that would be found on some components of World War II era US armor, namely this single piece transmission housing. So we're going to load some of this up on a stiff bristled brush, and we're just going to stipple this all over that area. The important thing to try and do here is make this look irregular. You don't want a bunch of brush strokes here, you just want to do little stippling motions to really pull out the bumpy texture and avoid any long streaks that make it look like it was painted on. This is a super simple technique, but honestly I think it makes all the difference in the world. You'll see how good it looks at the end. I highly recommend trying this on your American armor builds. We're going to do this exact same technique on the gun mantlet and on the counterweights on the back of the turret because all these components would be cast as well. The only thing to be careful about here is not getting this on any elements that you don't want to have that cast texture, so if you need to switch down to a smaller brush, that's totally fine. Here I'm using a pretty fine brush to really emphasize the weld line on this protrusion here that's protecting the actual gun barrel itself. Tamiya had molded this in to kind of replicate that effect, but I didn't think it looked fantastic, so I'm just trying to improve it here, and all in all I think it looks much better now. All right, next we're going to move on to a couple tarps here. I wanted to add some tarps to the back of the engine deck. I have a whole video on this process. I'll link it here so you can check that out. I'm not going to go into it in detail today, but I'm just going to add a few tarps on the back of the tank here, one on the turret I think. All you do, you just dip a piece of tissue paper in a mixture of PVA glue and water, and you just put those on the vehicle anywhere you want. Let them dry and they'll be ready to paint. One of the nice things about PVA glue is you can just manipulate it with your hands, try and get the tarp in whatever position you want, let it sit, walk away for the night, let it dry, and then you can return to it tomorrow. All right, once your tarps have dried completely, we're gonna move on to the priming phase. So I'm using some Vallejo black acrylic primer, and we are gonna shoot the entire vehicle with this black primer. I know a lot of people like to strip the paint on projects like this when they're refurbishing or starting over. Honestly, I don't really mind. Yes, the paint is gonna be a little thicker, but you know what? For something like this, I'm really just trying to practice my techniques, improve the vehicle a little bit, so I'm gonna just spray right over those decals, right over all these old weathering elements. It's not gonna look like a perfectly crisp and clean new kit, but you know what? That's okay. Once everything's primed, you can already start to see how good that casting texture looks. Like, that is just such an improvement over the bare plastic that we had before. Moving on to paints, we're going to use some Ammo MIG Crema Vice just to do the interior of the hull here. It's just white, so the crews could easily identify oil spills or any, fluid leaks inside the vehicle. Not picky about what color this is, I just wanted some kind of off-white. So I sprayed the whole interior there with the Crema Vice. Next, moving on to our trusty olive drab base here. This is going to be the main color of our vehicle, so we're going to spray this all over the hull and the turret. One thing we want to avoid painting here is the tracks themselves. These are going to stay that flat black color because they are the rubber block tracks. So just try and avoid those while you're painting. Save yourself some cleanup work later. Due to the nature of the hull on the M10, I can't pop these bogies off without doing any damage. So I'm going to leave them on there. I'm just going to try and paint around the rubber on the road wheels. Just paint the metal here with the olive drab. There's going to be overspray. That's okay. We're just going to have to clean it up with a brush later. Here I'm just doing a little bit of highlighting on the vehicle. I grabbed some olive drab light base and we're just gonna feather this in on the highest surfaces of the vehicle. This is an artificial lighting effect. It kind of tricks the eye into making it seem like sunlight is hitting these surfaces, and it makes the lower parts by default a little bit darker. Just tricks the eye. I think it looks pretty good. And after we add the other weathering finishing effects, it just rounds it out, makes the vehicle look a little more dynamic. All right, moving on to hand brushing. So first off, all these bedrolls and little tarp components you see stuck on the side of the vehicle here, these are by an awesome company called Value Gear. Check them out if you haven't already. And even though this is a refurb, this is exactly how I would have painted these if this was a new model. I just apply them with super glue right to the side of the vehicle, prime the whole thing, and then individually paint them. So I started out with khaki here, and I'm just gonna paint in one bedroll from each of these clusters. For a second color, I'm gonna grab this green gray, and I think this fits really well with the overall color scheme of the vehicle, and I'm just gonna paint in a second bedroll on all of these clusters. The name of the game here is really just to create some variation and, changes for the eye to look at between each one of these individual components. Just add some interest to the vehicle and breaks up that overall olive drab. I'm gonna keep doing the same thing with a bunch of different colors. There are no hard set rules here. Just try and pick a color palette that matches well with this overall olive drab. I like to use greens and khakis and browns, things that are realistic to the time period and just add visual interest to the model. For the tarp on top of the turret, I'm using this Luftwaffe camo green. It's a little more vibrant than the other colors we've been using, but I'm doing this because I want to draw attention to the turret. There are so many visual elements to enjoy and appreciate inside the turret, so this kind of tricks your eyes into looking there because it's this bright, vibrant green, and then you can check out all the other stuff that's around it. I'm using another beige color here to paint in these very fine straps and tie downs on all of our bedrolls and tarps and stuff. This is a great way to break up those kind of blocky colors that we had with all the tarps, and as you can see here, adds some great character. It's convincing. It makes them look like these bedrolls are actually strapped onto the side of the tank instead of just floating in space there. Surprise, surprise, we've got more US olive drab. We're gonna use this for our jerry cans and for the helmets that are strewn all around the vehicle. This chocolate brown works really well for the wood of our M1 Grand that's on the back of the turret here. And then I'm just gonna use flat black to paint in pretty much all the elements that we have left. I'm doing these spare track racks on the back here in flat black. Again, really makes them pop and stand out from that olive drab base. A little flat black for the rubber on our spare road wheel, and for the metal on our pioneering tools on the rear of the vehicle. At this phase, we also want to clean up our road wheels and just repaint the rubber on any areas where we might have oversprayed with the olive drab. I like to use this tan earth color for the wood parts of our pioneering tools. We're going to finish up our brush painting with a couple of metallics. We're going to use Tamiya's copper for the buckles on our straps and tie downs. And then we're going to use Vallejo's white aluminum for the turret gear. With all that done, we're going to spray the whole vehicle with a coat of gloss varnish, let it sit overnight, and then we'll come back and do decals. Since this is a refurbish project, I had to dig into the spare box for some extra decals. These are actually the ones from this actual Tamiya kit that I didn't use the first time I built it, so they work perfectly. You guys know the drill. We're just using micro set, micro sol, carefully zhuzhing these into the position we want. One of the cool things about this casting texture is that decals really adhere to all those bumps and grooves and everything. This is what it looks like after about half a dozen coats of microsol. It looks awesome. I think it looks like real cast metal. Love this effect. All right, folks, home stretch here. We're on to weathering. So obviously I've let the decals dry completely. I've clear coated the entire vehicle with another gloss coat, let it sit overnight. And now we're going back with Ammo's dark wash. We're just gonna do a simple pin wash here on all the raised elements around all the nuts and bolts, the road wheels, inside these jerry cans here, pretty much anything that's gonna get an artificial shadow, just make those details pop. We're also gonna do this on the bed rolls, the tarps, everything that's strewn around the vehicle. And we're gonna come back with some enamel thinner and clean this up after. With all the dark wash applied, we're gonna break out the enamel odorless thinner and we're gonna clean up our excess. The M10's got a ton of really interesting features and rivets and hinges and weld joints and all sorts of cool stuff. So we're just gonna make those all pop, clean up any of the extra that we don't want, and it's gonna create this awesome artificial shadow effect, really make all those details pop. Once you clean everything up to a point where you like it, we're gonna walk away for a while, let that enamel thinner dry, and then we're gonna move on to an oil dot filter. I'm using two different artist oils here. This is a burnt umber and a yellow ochre. I'm gonna start with the burnt umber and just make little random dots all over any of the vertical surfaces on the vehicle. You just wanna apply these randomly, and then we're gonna come back and streak these to create this awesome filter effect. So stick with me. I know it looks kind of weird right now, but it'll be awesome when we finish it up. We're gonna do the exact same thing with the yellow ochre, just more random dots on all of the vertical surfaces. It's a good idea to walk away for like 15 minutes after you apply all these dots, let the paint sit a little bit, and then we're gonna come back and blend them all together. With all those applied, I'm gonna grab this awesome saw brush that I got from Ammo Mig here. I'm gonna dip it in some enamel odorless thinner, dry most of it off, and then just do these gentle downward strokes to pull all the colors together, blend them in, and it creates this awesome streaking effect on the side of the vehicle. I love this like ruddy brown color that it creates. It works super well with olive drab and it makes it look like the vehicle's been in the field for a while. So great technique. If you haven't tried this yet, give it a go. With that dot filter complete, I've sprayed the whole vehicle with a matte varnish to protect the layers we've already done, and I'm gonna come back and do a little bit of pigment work. Using a dry brush and this Europe Earth pigment, I'm just gonna gently accumulate this in areas where dirt and dust would kind of pile up on the top of these wheel well covers here. I'm gonna do it around the areas where the track is gonna be moving, kicking up dust, and just kind of let logic guide you here. I also like to do a little bit of pigment work around the turret ring, because if you think about it, the turret is kind of protecting those areas. There's an overhang and dirt and dust would accumulate there. I don't go too crazy on the undercarriage with pigments. I just want to get like a intentionally haphazard effect going on here. I'm going to put some in a few of the road wheels, on the bogies, on the actual lower hull itself. Once we bind this to the vehicle with our enamel thinner, we're gonna do some blending and spread it out and get that overall dusty look. So don't absolutely douse things in pigment. You just wanna do a nice light touch like you see here. That's gonna be perfect. Don't be afraid to go a little heavy on the tracks themselves. We're gonna do some blending at the end, but just grime these up nice and good. Most of it's gonna get knocked off. You just wanna make sure some dust stays in those nooks and crannies where it would really get trapped on an actual vehicle. We're gonna do a little bit of dusting on the bottom of our turret just to tie in with those effects we did around the turret ring. And then we're gonna move on to a second color here. Because dirt and dust isn't just a single tone in nature, we wanna add a little variation. So I've grabbed a dark earth tone here, and I'm just gonna put a few dots here and there to kind of break up this all lighter dust tone that we have. Just makes it look more realistic. To bond our pigments to the vehicle, we're gonna dip a brush in a little enamel odorless thinner and just gently tap that next to the areas where pigment has been applied. The pigment's gonna absorb the thinner, and when it all dries, it's gonna bond really nicely to the vehicle like you can see here. Now we're just gonna grab a dry brush and blend in those pigments. We're gonna knock off most of this, and then it's just gonna leave behind a little dusty residue anywhere where dust would actually accumulate in real life, and that's gonna give us the effect that we're looking for. For one of our very last steps, we're gonna break out our metallic pencil here, and I'm just gonna spruce up the M2, the Modus machine gun that's going on the back of the turret here, just by gently scribbling this along the raised edges of the machine gun. It really helps pop those details. Looks a lot better, a lot more realistic. Actually looks like gunmetal. Gonna do the same thing on the M1 Grand here, and just anywhere on the vehicle where you want to make those scratches in metal parts really pop. Alright, so here is our fully refurbished Tamiya 135 scale M10 tank destroyer. Like I said in the beginning of this video, guys, I can't recommend this enough. It's a super rewarding experience to refurbish a kit, and while I know it can be kind of nerve-wracking to pull one of your favorites off the shelf and just paint over it again, I promise you're going to get something out of it. I got to practice some techniques, add that cast texture, throw some tarps on here, and I'm just so much happier with the final result. Looking back at my old version, it's a little too dusty, the diorama base is a little simple, and I'm just so happy with the result now. And honestly, one of the best things about this, I didn't have to spend a dime on this refurb project. I used all supplies that I've had, and now I have a kit that's up to snuff with my current skills. I didn't have to go out and drop $40 on a new kit and start from scratch, and I've got an awesome M10 in my cabinet that I can appreciate every day. Alright, so that's it for me, guys. If you got something out of this video, please make sure you hit that like button and subscribe for more content. It really helps me grow the channel. And if you go give this a go on your own, please come back and leave a comment. I'd really love to hear how your refurb went. You can send me some pictures at Sprues and Brews on Instagram. I'd love to see them. So until next time, guys, be well, happy building, and cheers.